2 years ago, 6 councillors signed a notice of motion which led to our community safety plan. 5 are in this room: Hawkins, Stevens, Bresciani, Fendura, and Mancinelli. That motion reads in part, whereas crime in our city can be attributed to social issues like poverty, homelessness, inequality, addictions, mental health issues, among others, and whereas a harm reduction and social determinant approach is required to address the causes of crime in our community. I think it's relevant to ask whether we stand by that motion or don't we. Last week, after much hand-wringing, we approved $875,000 in new funding to address the root causes of crime. Today, the police ask us for an increase of 4 times that amount. The police have been getting increases like this since 2011. As administration confirmed last year, funding has grown for the police at about twice the rate of population in the city of Regina. I say if the cop-to-pop ratio hasn't kept pace, that's not because we haven't been adequately funding them. It's been about the way the board has allocated those funds. They can look at reallocating if they need to, rather than continually asking us for these substantial increases. As described in the 2019 motion, the root causes of crime are things like poverty and addictions. Those inhumane conditions are most concentrated in my ward and those of Councillor Stevens. Therefore, crime is also concentrated there. In large part, Council's historic rubber stamping of police budget reads like councillors trying to protect their residents from my residents. I think people should be less afraid than they are. I've knocked on these folks' doors. Many of them live complex lives but are trying their best. They need support to get out of poverty and addiction. They need support to do that, and more pointedly, they need us to stop harassing and throwing them in jail. To be clear, I'm concerned about police as an institution rather than about individual officers, including Chief Bray, who I respect. It's not about bad apples. It's not a coincidence that Councillor Stevens and I were elected to represent North Central and Heritage in particular. We both beat out candidates inclined to rubber stamp police budgets. We heard from one of those candidates today. The people living in these neighborhoods most affected by social neglect and therefore crime have elected councillors aimed at getting to root causes, rather than always and endlessly just responding to them. I think it's worth asking whether we should trust those people most affected. Many of the people living in Heritage and North Central have dealt with these complementary forces of government violence and government neglect for a long time. We see it play out in various forms of racism in our city, and that's some of what we see in the alarming rates of incarceration of Indigenous people, including by those arrested within the city of Regina. To say that this budget has grown dramatically, not sort of just by a force of nature, but actually by votes that we're making, including by some folks on council. So to those elected in 2016, the net budget has grown by $18 million a year. Imagine if we had provided that money to organizations aimed at addressing the social determinants of crime. Imagine what would happen if we started to provide that now. I say we could make a substantial difference on both officer and community safety. Similarly, for those elected in 2012, we've seen a $31 million per year increase in that. Imagine how many people we could house per year with that money, what addiction treatment or food security issues we could solve. I think what we see is we continue to put all of our eggs in one basket. So this year, if all goes as it's slated to go, we'll put about $90 million into reaction and $1 million new dollars into avoiding these negative outcomes. So I say that's not a balance, that's not striking it right, that is continuing to put all of our eggs in one basket. And I want to say we can talk about helping vulnerable people all we want, and we do that. If that concern doesn't show up in our budget, I think it's hollow political speak. And if we don't vote to provide supports in December, we should be embarrassed to talk about them in January. All I ask is that folks provide the same oversight here that we provide to all other budget lines. I say we should save money today and spend it tomorrow on the community supports we need. So I'll be voting against. Thank you.